Welcome to People Helping People, the podcast to help social entrepreneurs build better businesses and have a greater impact. I'm your host, Adam Morris, and today I'm excited to talk about emotional well-being. This is a topic that has been coming up a lot in our social impact mastermind, and just with other social entrepreneurs that I've talked to. And I think it's really important just to be able to step back and take a look at ourselves and say, hey, how are we showing up to the world? What do we need? Some of it comes from this idea that you can't help others if you're not taking care of yourself first. The first thing they teach you when you get in an airplane is put on your mask before assisting the person next to you. And I think the same goes for social impact work. Now, I think from my conversations with other founders, what I've noticed is that there's just a general heaviness right now. There's a lot going on in the world. Change in funding and grants have impacted people a lot. The change of pace of life, the uncertainty that's coming in. Some of that has to do with AI. Some of that just has to do with the natural instability that we're all feeling right now. Today, I want to do three things in this episode. I want to talk about what's happening, what I've seen, check in where you actually are, and then talk about what it looks like to make sure that you're in the best state so that you can keep doing the work that you love and that lifts you up. Before I start, I wanted to say that I realized I was disconnected from our Give Back Hack community of social impact entrepreneurs and change makers. And we had this social in February where we got together and, it was 20 of us just getting together, reconnecting, having nice conversations about what was going on in our life. And I realized that was something that was really missing. Just being able to step in and have these great conversations with other people in our community. But there was a constant theme in there of those conversations of people feeling disconnected and just feeling so warm being able to be together with other people that understood the world from that same angle where we're trying to show up and make the world a better place. All right, so let's start by setting the stage, like what's going on. We know that, of whatever 100,000 nonprofits that receive it used to be like 300 billion in federal funding. There was major cuts in 2025, and some of those programs their budgets have been slashed by 60, 70, 80%. That means for a lot of these social issues that we're showing up to solve, that there is less money in the ecosystem for addressing those. We've seen programs have to close up shop. We've seen funding go to larger, more established players so that they can just hold on and keep the lights on. And so it makes it a lot more difficult when you're trying to solve issues in your community and you're making progress. And then it feels like the federal government pulled out the rug from underneath you. And without that rug, it's just like now you're standing there and you're like, okay, now I have to put in extra effort just to get back to where I was. That's a lot of stress. I get it. I mean, it's one thing to feel like there's a funding shortfall. There's never enough money for all the dreams and aspirations and ideas that people in the nonprofit and impact space have. And I think it's always been difficult to say, hey, how can we create opportunities? But there's something dramatic going on right now. And I think it's important to honor that and say, hey, yeah, actually creating change has become more difficult in a lot of ways. And in a lot of areas, like there are consequences for speaking out about the kind of change that you want to make, especially among DEI. And I think this strive for equity and equality hasn't gone away, but it's hard when it's just like, corporations have to change how they're talking about it because there's implications. There's retribution from the federal government for doing just the simple things that are right. I think what I'm noticing is in this, that organizations are finding new ways to diversify and communicate. But even those that are adapting are feeling exhausted. I think that's very normal. If you're in the impact space and you're feeling this heaviness, I want you to know you're not alone. Like people are feeling this across the board. And I think that's really important to know that it's not like a personal thing. That's not you. It's a rational response to a really irrational situation of things that are going on. And when we come together, this is our current normal of what we have to deal with. And looking at the situation as today, it means we have to be adaptable and find new solutions that work best. Figure out where our efforts are going to make the most difference. I think the other interesting thing that's happening right now is just this general acceleration of everything that is going on. And acceleration in uncertainty, acceleration with AI, and basically how people are showing up to the world. I'm in a mastermind group. I'm part of Ali Abdal's Lifestyle Business Academy, which is this group with accountability and coaching and programming around developing lifestyle businesses. And there's this general like AI anxiety underneath the surface where it's just like people know AI is changing so fast. It's been so different from where it was last year. And it's just like this unknown implication of like where things are headed. I think it's very difficult for the brain to stay on top of increasing change and just live in a world where you're getting to the place where it's like you have an idea and being able to go from that concept to like creating it. That time is shortening. I read an article somewhere that was talking about how this started, eons ago. At one point in time, in order to cross a river, you might have to take a 2-day journey to find a suitable crossing point where you could get across. And when they invented a raft, they were able to just go across the river in 15 minutes. They just saved themselves, a day and a half. Well, with AI, these things of like scoping out a project, building a website, building up communication, doing research, things that would have taken months or, a year, could be compressed down into like 10 minutes. And so it's like how you engage with creating things, especially in the digital space, has transformed a lot. And you see this going on in the development world. Like I was a programmer for 25 years. I've had experience. Last year when I was playing around with vibe coding, I was still better. It was easier for me to do things on my own than to vibe code it. This year that's changed, right? It's come so far in the last year. And I can see where it's headed. The world of software development is going to be completely different a year from now. And I can only imagine 3 years from now how like the career path of like developing things that we interact with on the internet is going to be completely different. And that's really hard for the brain to comprehend, this kind of rate of change. And I think there's this kind of fear of becoming obsolete that's growing underneath the surface of like, all right, hey, if I don't stay on top of these things, like, am I going to be obsolete in a few months? And I think that's kind of the general gist of like, hey, life is speeding up and change is happening so quickly. How do you stay on top of things and adapt? And it's just like before, it's like, yeah, you could become a master of something in 10 years. And now it's like, well, nobody's had 10 years of experience with this. And there's no point in really trying or really pushing yourself because you don't know what it's going to be. So how do you balance that, staying on top of things and understanding where things are going so that you can keep through it? But I think the deeper point here is like, there's a sense of burnout, right? When life starts changing too quickly, when there's a lot of uncertainty, many of the social entrepreneurs I work with have day jobs, and it's just like they're working for companies where they're reducing their workforce and they are changing how they're hiring or the skills that are needed in order to survive. Recently, Accenture started monitoring their employees' use of AI, and that's going to be a judging criteria for their success, right? Accenture is grading their employees on how much they use AI, because if they're not using it enough, then, they're going to be compensated differently. And so I think there's a trend of like why we're feeling more burnt out, right? There's this acceleration. There's all this stuff that's happening so quickly where it's really hard to keep track of it. And it's hard to see what the patterns are when things are in a very dysfunctional state. One thing I have to say here as an aside is the social impact innovators that I know are used to kind of being on this forefront of really digging in, having conversations in the community, understanding what problems people are facing and how they are struggling, and then coming up with really cool solutions in order to solve them. And so I think this world of social entrepreneurship is a neat model for saying, hey, here's something that we can apply in order to tackle these problems. And it brings a very curious mind, but it also brings somebody who has a lot of empathy and a lot of understanding, a lot of willingness to reach outside of their comfort zone and maybe do something on a, weekend, which is not just hanging out in a bar or watching Netflix, actually showing up into the world and like doing something creative that's building connection and community. And I think through that kind of ethos of showing up, being part of something, that's what's going to drive change in a positive way. That's going to allow us to find the solutions that actually work for us in these crazy times. But before we get into that, I think it's important just for us to acknowledge, right, between federal policy, AI, and this like economic uncertainty, this polarization, the pace of change, like things that we used to take for granted, that is a ton for our brains to process. And that's adding a lot of stress. And it's important to acknowledge that, yeah, this is just a factor of the way the world is right now. It's hard to ask the question of like, hey, how sustainable is your current pace? Like, what are you facing? What are you experiencing? Like, if you had to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 of how well you're managing your emotional well-being right now, where would you be on that scale? For the social entrepreneurs that I work with, I think this is one of the most key important things that's often neglected. And it's a very important piece to the puzzle. So I shared this analogy at the beginning, right? If you're on an airplane and you have to put on an oxygen mask, they always tell you to put yours on first before putting one on for the person next to you. And I think the same applies in the social impact space, right? If you're completely stressed out trying to build something that's going to deliver impact and you're burnt out and you're at wit's end, you can't show up to the world and create better solutions, right? You can't hold that space for somebody else. I've often learned that, you can't change anybody, but when you work on yourself and you become a better and more grounded, people look at what you're doing and they observe and they pick up from that. And when you're grounded, you start to see things differently. You understand other people's suffering and how they're struggling with it. And if you can be an example for, that just general, like how are you dealing with the suffering that happens in your life? That's where some of the magic happens, some of the change happens, some of the new ideas come out that make a huge difference. But I think it's easy for a social entrepreneur to forget that you are part of the equation, that your well-being is as important as the well-being that you're creating for others. And really prioritizing that, really having an honest conversation with yourself of like what's right for you and what your capabilities are. And understanding like how you're taking care of yourself. Now, I'm somebody who's meditated for years and I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling all this craziness going on. I facilitated this program called Creativity and Personal Mastery, a really interesting program where we look at the mental chatter that's going on in our head. We look at the mental models that we've built up of the world around us. And we craft like new realities of like, here's how we can approach things in a different way. We've had these really deep conversations that are introspective and looking at like, hey, what is going on in my mind of how I show up to the world? And what are different ways that I can show up to it? And it's developed this kind of self-awareness of checking in and just saying, yep, here's what's happening. Here are ways that I can, notice when I'm out of alignment with what I'm doing and make an adjustment to do something more effective. But it's still so hard to do. It's easy to get caught up in life. And, I notice myself ignoring my own signals when I'm tired and I'm just pushing through and staying up late trying to finish something, or I'm stressed out about something because I can't figure it out. And I'm just like going around in circles, chewing on something, but really I'm just exhausting myself and perpetuating the problem. And I think it's a challenge to talk about. I meet with social entrepreneurs. It's very easy to talk about, hey, what are you struggling with in your building your revenue models? Or like, what's your strategy with marketing yourself and coming up with a plan of reaching new people and building new conversations? But to actually dive into that conversation of like, how are you doing emotionally? Like, what's going on there? What are you facing? When you have those conversations, sometimes really complicated things come up. Work situations can be very stressful. And if you're balancing that on top of running a social enterprise, like I hear you, you're not alone. I know so many of you that are going through really tough things right now. And my heart goes out to you. When things get difficult, I think some of the first things that we sacrifice are those that are taking care of ourselves, right? The time that we spend out in nature, the time that we spend connecting with people and just having really good human connections with our friends or the people that support us. And also some of those like self-care activities, right? Whether that's exercise or meditation or some kind of connection that you do with your body and mind. And I think, when we sacrifice this time outside or movement or connection or stillness or a sleep or a diet, it's like those are the things that actually give us the capacity to keep going. I know when I'm stressed out and I get overtired, I tend to doom scroll on my phone. And, that leads me to stay up later and get less sleep. And then it's this downward spiral. It's this downward spiral, which just kind of compounds itself. And it's easy to lose sight of here's what the most important thing is for me to focus on. And, you have to find the right thing for you. For me, Vipassana meditation and yoga are two practices that are very important for me. But also, like, I'm an Enneagram 9 peacemaker, right? I know I have this kind of introversion bubble of I need space to myself where I'm not being judged and I'm not being looked at by the outside world. And if I can find that space, that gives me a chance to recover my energy. It's very important that I make that space and time. So if I stretch myself too thin in that kind of inner introversion energy, depletes, where I just don't have that energy, then I can really fall back and it impacts me in a big way. So I think there's something of understanding yourself and your own cycles and what you need, and just making sure that you're clear. Yeah, here are the non-negotiables in my life that I can't sacrifice, even when life gets difficult and stressful, because that's what's going to keep you going. I think if you're do a simple check-in, there's some natural things like, hey, are you getting enough sleep? How much is that for you? Is it 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours? Are you staying hydrated? Are you getting enough movement during the day? Whatever that is for you, whether it's exercise of a particular type or just going for a walk. And then I think there's this element of connecting with nature. What's the time outside that you've spent? It's really hard in the winter when it's cold outside. And as it warms up, it's like much easier to get out, but are you making time to actually be out there? Get that sunlight, get that fresh air. And then the other pillar is social connection, right? Who are you connecting with, where you have friends that support the work that you're doing and check in and care about your well-being, where you're part of something bigger than yourself. I think that social connection outside of just a work environment or your relationship is really important. Like, how are we connecting with the people around us? And not just showing up to serve your community, but actually, to enjoy life, to have fun there. And then what sort of method do you have in your life for checking in with yourself? For me, I started this morning pages exercise by Julia Cameron from The Artist Way. And it's basically just a brain dump in the morning. I sit and I write my morning journal religiously every morning. It's a way for me to check in of what's going on in my mind, what I'm experiencing. Sometimes it's about my hopes, my dreams. A lot of time it's about my to-do list and how I'm feeling. But it's a place for me to check in. And then I review that at the end of the week. And then every 100 days, I kind of review the larger picture of what's going on. And I found having this kind of system of checking in with myself and just understanding what the trends are has made a huge difference in course correcting when I'm not taking care of my own well-being or I'm trying to figure out something else. Okay, so now we've just talked about protecting ourselves. Let's talk about the other half of because this isn't about retreating into ourselves and just creating a safe little bubble where we're taking care of ourselves, but it's about showing up differently to the world. What does that mean? How do we get out into the world and meet people where they're at? I think there's a tendency when times get tough to hunker down, work harder, isolate, and withdraw because it's safer, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to get out there and get involved. And I think the point of getting out isn't just to network with other people. It's not about building your connections to your target audience, trying to build your business, but it's about being a human being and being in the room of other human beings who are going through similar things and being able to share that and have real conversations. I think some of our most meaningful moments in the Social Impact Mastermind, it's not about strategy or how you're building your business, but it's when someone says, hey, I'm struggling, and there's just this empathy, this understanding of yeah, I get it. You're going through something tough. And for them to be able to be heard without that judgment or without needing to be something other than they are, just being able to hold that space for each other. I think connections like that is what builds resilience. And I think it helps remind us that we're connected to something bigger, and even though we can feel like we're in it alone, that we're not. We're surrounded by a community that really cares, that's really trying to show up in new ways. I think I see that in our impact community in Columbus. We're adapting. we're trying to figure out, hey, what's the best way that we can show up now with the resources that we have? And it's a struggle, but it's also interesting to know that it's not all on your shoulders, right? We're all in this together. And if you can connect with the other people that are busy trying to figure this out, there's a multiplying effect of what good you can do. I think with any social issue, there's always this question of hey, I don't have to solve the whole puzzle, but can I be this perfect puzzle piece that helps tie things together in a new way? It's when you start thinking like that, you start seeing, hey, here's the partners that I can work with, here are the other people that I can fit in to actually build a really beautiful picture and just be, a perfect piece of that puzzle. There's this element in social impact of meeting people where they are, right? Kind of showing up and not making assumptions about the problems that people are experiencing. I talk a lot about doing customer discovery or validation, where you show up and you don't try to just push your solution on the world, but you understand how the people you're serving are experiencing the problem that you're trying to solve. And then you involve them in making that decision. But I think we have to do that with ourselves. We have to show up with ourselves and be honest with here's how we're experiencing the problem in our life. And then sharing that with the people around us, so that we can create a better environment for creating change. One element of that is showing up authentically. But what does that actually mean? Now, I coach with Ultra Speaking as a program for public speaking. And this topic comes up from time to time of like, hey, I just want to have more authentic conversations with people. How do I do that? How do I be myself and open up? And basically what people are trying to say is, how can I have a conversation which is not just at the surface level, right? Something that's not talking about the weather, but talking about something real, like opening up, getting past the surface. And there's kind of this element of like, what does it mean for me to be vulnerable? And how can I share something which is personal, but not private? Like, how do you know what that boundary is of like, hey, here's the private stuff that I'm not going to share with the world, but here's how I can be a little bit more personal and share my experience with what's going on so that other people feel comfortable sharing that experience too. Sometimes if you've gone through some hardship or suffering in your life and you can speak to that, it creates this invitation for others to speak about that too. Sometimes it just means showing up with curiosity and no judgment, like being able to kind of see behind somebody's words and see where the suffering is in their life. Now, with creativity and personal mastery, like I've worked with people at all ranges of income and abilities. And it's interesting to realize that, okay, everybody is suffering in their life one way or another. Like suffering is part of humanity and it's something that binds us all. And if we start to make room for people to express that, it leads to really powerful conversations because we've dealt with suffering in many different ways. We've had to overcome it. And just noticing that we're all in this similar space of trying to figure this out, that can really create these authentic conversations and go deeper. But some things that you can actually do here, right? So one, I run a social impact mastermind, and I find this mastermind support of people coming together to support each other really valuable. You're just making a specific time to show up for a group of people. It makes such a difference. But there are a lot of local events that are happening in your ecosystem wherever you are. Here in Columbus, we have Get Back Hack, we have Sea Change, we have the Columbus Gives Back, we have BESA, we have the Point app. So many ways for people to get involved in volunteering in their community or getting involved in conversations. And I think Columbus is a very unique city in that people generally are very approachable. You can make time and talk to somebody. And there's a lot of really cool conversations happening in the city, but it's hard to find them. Like there's no clear map of saying, hey, you want to get involved in next, here's where you go. You kind of had to dig around and like, once you find the right thread of here's where things are going on, then you get in and you start building it. But there's a lot of these little pockets of people and conversations. The Columbus Foundation runs this big table event in October where these conversations are held over the city. And I always love going to them because it's like I discover like these new pockets of like people who are having conversations and doing cool things that it's like, otherwise, how would I find out about them? And so I think being able to find the people in your community that are doing things and having conversations and get out there and be part of that conversation, show up and help out. And then I think there's another aspect to this that's just like, how do you get outside? Like get away from your computer, get away from the technology, just be outside with people. For me in the social impact space, one of the best things I've ever done is like volunteered in the community. I think there's a social aspect to volunteering where you make a connection with somebody, where you're there just for like life being better, and it opens you up in a different way. And you're not there to like fix somebody or solve somebody else's issue, but you're just showing up in the moment for like somebody who has some hardship. And if you do it with other people, then it brings in this different energy of like, yeah, hey, life is about more than just earning money, getting your paycheck, retiring, and, watching Netflix. And you start to see, yeah, actually, I am part of this community and we're all helping each other out in different ways. I mean, usually if you're living in a city, you're part of a very complex ecosystem, right? There's all the food and groceries and restaurants and ways that you get food. There's your services like water and your infrastructure for travel. And so many different people are involved in making all these pieces flow together, right? Even before you get to the level of business and what they're doing or entertainment and how people are enjoying themselves. And I think once you see that you're part of this ecosystem of everything that's going on, that you're not just a number, you're not just an employee in a job that doesn't matter, but you've got a critical piece to play. How can you change how you show up and do that in a way that feels meaningful and touches you and fills you up? All right. Well, I think what I'm trying to say here with this whole episode is understand your emotional well-being. Take stock of where you're at, what's going on for you, and be honest with yourself. Take some time to review of like, what are the key activities that recharge you and keep you grounded and healthy, and make sure that you're spending time on those. If you are a social entrepreneur who's getting burnt out, like realize that you being burnt out isn't going to lead to creating a better impact. Make sure that you prioritize taking care of yourself first. And if you need help doing this, like reach out to me. I'm always available to talk through these things. I have a lot of experience here and promise to show up with a non-judgmental space where you can share what's going on and we can figure it out. Because you're part of something bigger than yourself. And it's really important for you to have that emotional well-being and that groundedness so that you can create all these kind of wonderful ideas and new things that are sparking within inside of you. And if you're a social entrepreneur, the world needs you. They need you now more than ever. And I want you to be at the best that you can be, because I think there is something really exciting about being involved in social impact work and seeing that change and seeing those connections that lead to something different. Trying to show up and do that when there's so much chaos in the world, it's hard. But you're not alone. It's not all on your shoulders. We all want the world to be a better place so that we can enjoy ourselves and just have richer social connections. You being stressed out and burnt out and at wit's end is not going to help any of that. So remember to make some time for yourself. Take care of yourself in that. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of People Helping People. I wasn't exactly sure how to convey this topic of finding your own emotional well-being, but if it resonated with you, let me know. I would love to hear what you thought of this and what's going on for you. What are you struggling with in terms of your own emotional well-being? Thanks for listening. And next time we're going to have great guests on People Helping People. I look forward to seeing what kind of fantastic social impact you're creating. So until next time, cheers.